Hello, welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, you can watch us live every Thursday night, 9:30, as you're doing right now, at least for the few of you that are live. So good evening. And you can send questions and comments on our Facebook event page for episode, what are we on? 261. 261. Or if you're watching live on YouTube, chat alongside. And good evening for those of you chatting on this YouTube video. My name is John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. Next up, Robert Johnson. How's it going, Robert?
Everything's going well. I'm on the men. So Robert Johnson, past master of Waukegan Lodge 78 and current sitting secretary over at Space Novum Lodge 1183 UD. And really quick, just a quick announcement. Submitted this show as a podcast will be on radio.com coming up real soon too. So if that's something that you're into and you've been using that and you're like, hey, when is TMR going to be on radio.com so I don't have to have a million podcast aggregator apps on my phone? Real soon. So just a heads up.
You didn't even know you needed it.
You didn't know. Yeah. Like you wanted.
Here we are providing.
Yep. See, I love you guys.
I love you too.
We're everywhere you want to be. Next up, Mike the intern.
Hey, Mike Hamrick here. Current junior deacon and lodge education officer for Triandria Lodge number 780 and new member of Lakeshore Lodge. Came 307.
One of those Lakeshore Lodges.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Juan Sepulveda, how are you doing this evening?
Doing very well, brothers. I say if you can't remember the numbers, you probably have one too many in there. I love you, Mike. Good evening, everybody. Juan Sepulveda here, host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast and lodge historian for Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in sunny Kissimmee, Florida. Established 1885.
Remember, if you can't remember your lodge number,
boom,
probably in Massachusetts. Jason Richards.
Hey, everybody. Jason Richards here, past master of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, established in 1877, and member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C., established 2012, I think. Ish.
I think it was right before Patriot Lodge, which was 2011. So
it might have been 2009.
Somewhere around there.
I was in grad school at the time. But
should I have said when the lodge was chartered?
Yeah, I don't know what is this.
No, I just bonused off of one.
All right, fine. How about that? Waukegan, 1849. Space Novum UD.
UD.
Not yet.
In the future. Okay, another thing real quick. Shout out to all the Patreon supporters. So if you want to help support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable and throw us a couple bucks for some love so we can keep the podcast moving, the hosting, the microphones, the video, you name it. So thank you very much for all of our patrons who've been supporting us. With that, we have this week's topic, which is kind of a revisit to one we did all the way back, I think in like episode 142, somewhere around there. It was definitely the 140s. We talked about Grand Lodge communications and sessions. And so Juan, being the ever studious traveling man with his own camera crew, went to the most recent Grand Annual Communication of the Grand Lodge of Florida. And it was not his first experience, and wanted to kind of share what he experienced, and then we can kind of go back and revisit some of the things we're looking forward to for our Grand Lodge sessions. So with that, I'm going to open it up for Juan to kind of start us off on what inspired him to go bring up this topic and what you found most interesting about your grand session.
Well, very good. Thank you, brother. I've been in Freemasonry for quite a few years, I think close to a decade now. And I've always heard of the Grand Lodge sessions, and everybody talks about them. I've attempted to go several times, but the timing has always conflicted with other responsibilities and different things. Plus, it's in the middle of the weekday during school time. It's a mess. Anyway, and I've always wanted, like, I want to go and see it. I want to get the whole experience. I want to get to really understand the whole process, because as Masons, the only contact we have with Grand Lodge is twofold. It's either through written communication, whenever we receive edicts and letters from the Grand Lodge, or whenever we get a visit to our district or to our lodge from one of the Grand Lodge officers or their committee man and all that. So that is just those 2 points of contact that we have with the Grand Lodge, and yet we're missing the point of view of the voting, the fraternity, the fraternal relations. We miss out on getting the largest gathering of Masons in your town, by far. And so I finally was able to arrange to go one day to our Grand Lodge communications. This was coincidentally the day that we were going to be voting on the new legislation. So for those who are listening, who might be new to the fraternity, who might not be members of the fraternity, our Grand Lodge is a group of officers. So it's a formal organization that looks at all the different, let's call them laws that we follow, all the different organizational, what other word would you use for that though? Other than laws, regulations, perhaps. So they look at all the regulations, and they are pretty much responsible to keeping their finger on the pulse of the organization as progress in society moves forward. They are the ones responsible for adjusting or allowing that to reflect in the legislations or the rulings that we're governed by. So my experience was bittersweet. It was sweet in the sense that I had an opportunity to see a lot of brothers that I had not seen for a long time. I had an opportunity to sit down for a great lunch with my brothers, and I got to meet vendors from all over the country. And it was bitter in the sense that our Grand Master, in the very middle of the legislation, he became gravely ill, and he was substituted at the moment by the Deputy Grand Master. And without giving you all the details about what happened, a few days later he passed away.
Wow.
So it was a somber mood in the event. There was a lot of uncertainty, but the planned agenda continued. And that was I want to elaborate on that a little bit later, because there's a lesson that I derived from that entire exchange. So it was sobering to see, here's a man who has been traveling with his committee man, and he's been traveling for, that's a very, very arduous position, to be the Grand Master of a state. And, I was saddened to imagine him looking forward to actually passing the baton to the next Grand Master and finally getting a chance to either spend time with family or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he practically just made it to the last day on the job, and then laid down his working tools.
It's crazy. Like when we first heard the story, it was like, so is this the brand new Grandmaster, or is this the Grandmaster passing the baton? We find out, this was the case here, and it kind of makes you think, because we're always like, yeah, not now. I'm busy with stuff. These things aren't going to occur to me whilst in the midst of something like that. There's a bit of ritual, that says something like, just at the height the height of everything, death comes when you least expect it. And like, it cuts you down or whatever. And it's got this beautiful verbiage about gazing exquisitely at like the terror. This whole bit, and it just makes me think like at the pinnacle of something like this, like it doesn't matter. This is what Masonry really prepares us for, but it's just crazy. And I just couldn't, like, how wild was this? Like, I couldn't imagine the ruckus and the, like, I hate the word egregore with a passion, but like the collective consciousness or the collective emotional weight of the sessions with that happening had to have been like, you're at Challenger Deep.
Yeah.
Like,
there's some trepidation in me as we speak about this, because there is that which happened within a tiled lodge, because effectively that it happened within a tiled meeting. So there are details that I may share with the brothers that I've sat in lodge with, but not something that I would particularly divulge within within the podcast. But needless to say, there was a somber mood throughout, and there was great concern. But the sessions moved forward as most worshipful Karum would have wanted. And I think that we honored him in the process. So without going into too many details, but that's one of the things that stood out the most to me, that even in that last moment of his brothers were present of mind to honor his desires. And because easily the sessions could have been canceled, or it could have been called to from labor to refreshment and then resumed sometime thereafter. But it was almost, it would have been seamless if it wasn't so obvious. And that's kind of like that doesn't make sense. If it was maybe a different officer, if it was the grand junior deacon, perhaps maybe nobody would have found out at the moment. But here you have the leader of the meeting stepping down and somebody else taking his place. So we're saddened for the family and for all the members. But it was a learning experience. It was a greater learning experience than I expected.
So, everyone had to kind of move on and get business done, right? Because that's why you do these Grand Lodge sessions or communications. And, somber notes aside, what else did you observe, see, as just how the general mechanics, what was going on and what was scheduled to go on?
Yep. Well, at least on this day, because there was legislation to be passed, and for those who are not familiar with how the new legislation is proposed, you'll have members of the organization, members of the order. They come up with things that they want to see in Masonry, and they would try to put down verbiage of what they would like to see happen. They propose, they'll send this over to the Grand Lodge for review, and there is a committee that evaluates it and sees that it doesn't conflict with our tenets, or the other that is not conflicting with other regulations or other laws, and then they'll pretty much help lodges understand the legislation better. So we have many months in advance where the new proposed legislation is read in lodge, in every individual lodge, for them to make a decision of whether they want to support it or not. Now, the craft votes by proxy. So as members of the lodge, we will discuss the legislation in lodge, and we'll voice our opinion to the principal officers of the lodge, and they in turn go into the Grand Lodge sessions and they cast a vote for us. So there are some technical things that, of course, are going to be different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but that's the gist of it. The law is proposed, is examined, so make sure that it doesn't conflict with other things and that it's a viable legislation, and then it goes to vote. The curious thing was the voting methods. There were some voting that was done digitally, other was done, by hand. And a part of me, I've asked and I've received different explanations for it. But in summary, not all legislation is principal officer aren't the only ones that vote. There are other legislation where even past masters have a vote as well. So that has to be handled differently. Other than that, it's almost like anything where you have people last minute voicing their opinion, of course, giving support or dissent for it.
There's always one.
Actually, 3 minutes each. No, but it's and it's a very lively thing. You have people that are very passionate about the reason why they support or the reason why they don't support a legislation, and I think that has the power to sway indecisive minds or people that may not have all the details or might not understand the angle for the legislation. Other than the voting, it was amazing to see a room full of Masons with so many members. We had close to 1,500 brothers in attendance. So you can imagine prayers and, a SMIB wasn't casual in there. A SMIB was roaring.
Legit.
Yeah. So that was great. And of course you have these different levels of achievement or titles. So you have the entire lineup of past grandmasters sitting in the east, and you're walking in the same chamber where these men are, and you get a chance to meet and greet with them and get to know them at a more personal level. We're all on the level, some more than others, of course, like I always say. And we sit in different chairs, but other than that, you feel the love. You get to see a lot of brothers. I did get a chance to run into some brothers that recognized me from the Masonic Roundtable.
I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Did you have any fans show up?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. It was just we were in such a. So it was just like, oh, brother, how are you? And very quick, and they were very respectful of the time, especially because we had people wrapping us down at that time.
Come on, Juan, sit down, down, Juan.
The guy with the mullet in the back, go sit.
Which one?
Yeah, all of my brothers. But it was very good for the brothers that haven't attended a grand session. If it's within your means, I would recommend that you go to at least one and see how it is. The start for me was tedious. Not tedious. It just wasn't exciting. It felt slower than it needed to be. And of course,
I don't know. I'm not sure. And I don't mean this because we joke about it in the fraternity all the time. We have this kind of pomp and circumstance where there is an official opening to everything, and everybody who has any title that isn't, it is right worshipful is like nobody at Grand Lodge sessions.
Right.
So you like everybody who's above like a district deputy, grand master, just gets introduced. So like Illinois Grand Lodge is, of course, the Grand Lodge officers. Then they introduce the Board of Grand Examiners, and then they do like some ritual, like precision ritual work, and then of course, they'll introduce. Usually, we have honored guests of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge, the state of Illinois, so they'll go through their line, and I mean it's just wild, and literally, Grand Lodge Sessions opens at 8 a.m. and I would say introductions stop at about 9:45
PM.
There's a meme out there. I'm counting on Donnie Dillon to post it. It's the Bear Grylls. I'm just gonna say that because anyway, yeah, Juan, it's hard to get into it, right? Like, especially if you've never been there before, you're kind of like, ugh, what is this? It's like when you go to a meeting and it's the minutes. You're like, this is masonry. Yeah.
The part that impressed me watching that, though, when they started introducing our Grand Line, was in Ohio, the Grand Commandery does an arch of steel. And I am telling you, to hold their arms with their sword up like that for that long, I'm like, that takes some skill. Especially, I not to put these guys in any boat, but a lot of them are older. And they're holding that sword up there for a long time.
Mm.
Yeah.
I can always find the beauty in the ritual. Like, even I can be in lodge and I can see, the opening, and I try to pay attention to the wording, and I try to pay attention to the floor work, and try to derive some meaning to some of it, try to dig deeper and stuff. But here it was so many of us, and I couldn't even see what was happening. If the seating was arranged differently, perhaps I might have, had a better experience. But not being able to see some of the things, and I think that took away from the experience. But it got very energetic whenever it came time for voting. That was very, very exciting. Now, one thing is that, how, let me see how I can say this without saying it. In the middle of a meeting, if you have to be excused to go to the restroom, it's not a very discreet thing. And here we're talking about all the brass sitting in the east, and a ballroom, the grand ballroom full of people,
Hundreds and hundreds of people.
hundreds and hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
And here I realized that we wouldn't go from labor to refreshment until like noon or 12:45, something like that. And I had an appointment. I had to be out of there by 11. It was smack in the middle of the entire thing. And
So the whole Grand Lodge stopped and stared at you when you stood up, and it like creaked, and you were like, "Excuse me, excuse me,
A record scratch.
excuse me."
yeah, I opened that door.
Carry on. I have an appointment I have to go to.
No, fortunately, I was able to use technology and reschedule my appointment.
I was gonna say, wait, you can use technology to hold it?
Yeah, I held it.
Now, what I noticed with Ohio's, man, we could get in and out just about any time.
Oh, this is the same in Florida.
Yeah.
I just didn't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And nobody had at that point, nobody had stood up to do anything. So I'm looking around, nobody's done anything. I'm like, oh crap.
Nobody gets up because everybody's thinking like, maybe they're gonna say my name. No, they're not.
When they were going to say my name, I actually had to be standing out in the hallway in a long line of other guys whose names were getting said.
Oh boy.
But yeah, it is kind of the awkwardness of being the first one to stand up, right? Yeah, just even in general office space, you're like, I gotta pee. but I don't want to stand up. But if someone else stands up and goes to the door, maybe I'll stand up the same time they do. Just do that at, with a couple hundred of your closest brothers.
Yep. Now there's another thing also that I wanted to talk about when it comes to like legislation or official communications. Right now, Florida is going through a amity procedures with the Prince Hall Grand Lodge here in Florida. And one thing is for you to read the communications and then get just any brother's interpretation of it. Another is for you to actually hear from the Grand Lodge officers, hear from them what happened or what's the next step or why things are progressing the way that they are. So I found that to be invaluable, because if you don't go to Grand Lodge sessions and there is an important legislation presented before the craft, if you are expecting just the regular brother to come back and explain to you what he heard from the Grand Lodge officers and all the committee men and all that, unless this brother is not just great in memory, but great in everything, you're not going to get the information as it's presented. Because it's just like that telephone game. Like that, whatever information is presented there, you're going to get a version of it, whatever lingers in the memory of the brother. And if that brother comes in with preconceived notions of it or a biased opinion on it, God knows what's going to actually filter out and reach the independent lodges. So I thought it was very valuable for me to be there and actually listen to them reading some of the letters. There's also, we've had on and off situations with the Grand Lodge of Cuba in regards to some clandestine lodges that were in Florida territory without their consent. But there was a back and forth for many years of recognition and amity and no visitation and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so especially for brothers who are in jurisdictions where there are some big consequential legislations happening, I think it's invaluable for you to be there and for the brothers to understand the proposed legislations before they go before the craft. And this is going to be a call to action to the brothers that are listening. When you're in a lodge meeting and you are presented with proposed legislation and the summary thereof, don't look at it as something that is going to hold you from leaving lodge early. Either take a copy of it with you if you can, but take some time to discuss it with the brethren in lodge, so that you can help everybody be on the same page about what you want to happen. Because if you just leave it in the hands of anybody, if you just leave it in the hands of just the principal officers, you trust that they're going to make the right decision. You should be able to trust your brothers, but I've trusted brothers before and been sadly disappointed in some occasions. So it's something that you shouldn't delegate to other people.
It's interesting. So I understand different jurisdictions do this slightly different. In the state of Illinois, we have just the principal officers of each lodge. So we've got about 450 lodges in the state, maybe a few less now. And each one has 3 votes. And typically what will happen is there is continuity between the principal officers. They all agree to vote a certain way. The year before I was master, I just remember it was the year they introduced legislation to change the verbiage from Holy Bible to Volume of Sacred Law. my lodge was very opposed to the idea of doing this, even though I was for it. And as a principal officer, I voted the way the lodge told me to vote, um, which is what I guess you should be doing. Um,
There are limits to that, but yes.
yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. There are. Um, and I guess my second thought as we kind of talk about this, Juan, you said it's important to be there and to discuss this stuff. So if you and your primary officers are going down to the lodge, and maybe your lodge says, we don't really want to talk about the proposed amendments. We want you guys to just make those decisions. So, like, every year on the way to Grand Lodge Sessions, well, for us, it's a 4-hour train ride and it's over the weekend. So we go down on a Thursday and we stay there all day Friday and most of the day Saturday and ride home. But on that 4-hour train ride, there's probably a good hour where we're talking about, we have a little book and we're like, well, let's discuss this. And we're looking at codes and seeing precedent and all this stuff. And we're really discussing it. And in a lot of these cases, there's stuff that happens that is historic. Excuse me. And I don't mean this in a cynical way, but like in life, if you could imagine what it may have been like for somebody who lived before you to see something significant happen in, legislation in a state or in the country of the United States, for instance, and ask them how amazing it was to see this monumental thing happen. Well, we're just now having some of those monumental things happen in Freemasonry because we have a tradition, code word, kind of stagnant way of looking at things sometimes. And so we see some progressive issues happening now at Grand Lodge Sessions. And those are historic markers that maybe, maybe this is the next best thing as a Mason, maybe you can watch something get passed like this. Uh, But I wholeheartedly agree with Juan. The first year I went to Grand Lodge Sessions would have been 2011 or 12, and I've gone every year since. I don't miss it. It's I take work off and like it's over the weekend. So
Which brings up a good point. Is initially I thought if you've been to one, you've seen them all because it's usually the same kind of introductions, even though it's just a different guy wearing the same gold collar, or it's the same vendors over time. You see them, you kind of get your swag, and then you see the same ones next year. But I think that as you advance in Masonry, that you will be involved and or interested in other activities. So specifically, I know that in the Grand Annual Communications of the Grand Lodge of Virginia, that is also an opportunity where many of the committees meet as well. I mean, they meet during the year, but they can also meet in the same space, kind of at side sessions right before either the legislation's done or just to kind of go over anything, just because for opportunity's sake. And yet, those are some interesting times too, where you can kind of sit in and see what the brothers have been working on. And most of these, and just speaking for Virginia, some of these committees, they'll have their sessions open. So even if you're not a member of that committee, you could still, just pop a squat and hang out and see what they're talking about, because it is just like any government, it is your representatives that are trying to do things for the good of the order. And unless you're trying to be a troublemaker, they're more than happy to welcome you in to go see what progress they're making for the good of the craft. So that's kind of a fun thing, again, that I'm looking forward to as we approach ours in November.
Yeah, it's almost like that reminds me of politics. You have local government, and you have decisions are made on your behalf. You elected a representative for you. So whether it's a commissioner or whether it's the governor, and you are helping vote these people into office for them to start working on your behalf. Now, of course, when something bothers you, you're going to complain. Like, how many people here constantly complaining about the traffic in Kissimmee and, complaining about, all kinds of stuff, right? But the one way in which they can make a difference, which is actually to voice their opinion, not to their neighbor, to the mother, or to that Facebook group that doesn't care. Why don't you get involved then in the local politics? Get an opportunity to stand in front of this elected officer and voice your opinion. Try to get to understand, why did you make this decision that impacts me negatively? And you might be able to either understand why they made that decision, perhaps realize a separate consequence that you didn't consider, and they made that decision because of this alternate consequence that you are benefiting from. Or sometimes you go to them and they actually are able to see your point of view and make a different decision. The same thing happens here. If you can complain about masonry all you want, but unless you're really making strides to make a difference in masonry, all you're doing is making noise. You're just complaining about it. So how are decisions made in our organization as a whole? Well, they're made this way, through legislation, through getting to meet your district deputy grand master, and through him reaching out to the leaders of the fraternity. And so, like, John and I have had this conversation before. It's like, it really bothers us when people come to us with problems. And don't come to me with problems. Unless you come with a solution tucked under this arm and an alternate solution on the other arm.
Bingo.
Right?
And you better have a recommendation of one of those two.
Exactly. An intelligent one. And
hopefully,
well, you can only ask for so much. But seriously, it's like, and this dynamic happens everywhere, in local politics, and it happens, everywhere. It happens in families, and in any kind of dynamic where you have people making decisions on the behalf of other people. So if you want better decisions made, if you didn't like the decisions that they made last year, figure out who are the people that are making that decision. See what is your path to connecting with that individual through the right channels. Don't be skipping directly to the Grand Master and then getting yourself in trouble for that.
Ultimately, like, I think what's really important though is like when you attend Grand Lodge sessions. So like maybe for the first couple of years, maybe you don't do anything. Maybe you just sit back and observe, which is the smart thing to do.
True.
You want to know what's going on, and you kind of get a flavor for the problems that we have. You kind of get a flavor for your successes and what's going right. And then you start seeing a pattern of what issues we're dealing with year after year after year. And maybe, look, we're smart dudes. You're going to come up with a solution or something that you think is viable. Now, I don't know if it's like this in every Grand Lodge jurisdiction, but I think Joe Martinez wrote something for Virginia once, and I've written a couple things for Illinois. Oh, get out.
Joe who?
Yeah, Joe who?
Huh?
If you write, like, for instance, a couple years ago, we wrote legislation, and that has to be sent to the Grand Lodge 90 days before sessions. Then Grand Lodge board looks it over. They say, okay, cool, we'll bring this up. And then they can either lay it over till next year or they can vote on it now. And
just 90?
Just 90 days.
Oh.
90 days, baby.
Oh.
What about jurisprudence? Do they also send it there?
Well, so then jurisprudence looks at it and makes a recommendation on it. So like last year, we asked that, because for instance, Grand Lodge of the state of Illinois allows a Masonic lodge to meet 12 times a year for business. They may go dark any 2 months. So they have to meet at least 10 times a year, right? So 12, but they can choose 10. What we thought would be wonderful would be a way to write your bylaws in a way that bills take care of themselves, which many lodges already do in the state and around the world, and then say, by the way, you only have to meet for business quarterly, and you still have to meet 10 times a year minimum, so you fill the other 6 with education or degrees or whatever. Like, you fill it however you want to. And we brought that before the Grand Lodge, but that got shut down. So we were thinking about it again, but I don't think we're going to do that. So, but the point is, my disappointment notwithstanding, take it away and throw it. Find something that you're passionate about, that you think you can change, that you think you can create a good argument for. Figure out how you do that, and work through it. And that's how you can make the fraternity better. That's how you can work within the confines. It's like bowling, right? You put the bumpers up, so you got to work within there. That's what your lodge secretaries usually do, right? They're the bumpers that keep you from doing things you're not supposed to do. But work through the system and try to submit legislation that you think will better the fraternity. And hopefully everybody will agree with you if it's a good idea. If not, they'll tell you. Trust me.
Yeah. Here's another thing. Proposing legislation, of course, it is something that is tedious. There is a protocol to be followed when it comes to verbiage. You need to be able to structure this in a proper manner, not just so that it makes sense from a jurisprudence formatting, but also the people that are going to read that within lodge, they need to understand what they're voting for, or they need to understand what they're doing. So I've read some proposed legislation that I swear to you looks like someone wrote it by holding the pencil with their feet. And like, I understand maybe you have the passion to actually sit down and try to make a change, but if you cannot communicate effectively, there is no hope. And you could be, instead of helping, hindering. That's the dichotomy that I always talk to my kids about. If you're not helping, you're hindering. Period. If you're not helping, you're just getting in the way of progress. And here's the reasoning behind why I say that. Let's say it's a very sensitive topic, and let's say we're looking to recognize the stellar trifecta lodge of the universe. It's not recognized in many jurisdictions, but we want to make that move. Perfect. You write that legislation. It goes into Grand Lodge sessions. Because it's not written correctly, or it's not written in a persuasive way, or at least it's not clear enough as to what the steps are, it gets voted down. You don't know why it got voted down, but whenever that information is relayed to the lodges, to the individual lodges, oh no, they proposed that last year, it didn't go through. So when you express something like that, you might be giving people an impression that no, this is not a direction in which Freemasonry wants to move, right? Case in point, seeking to have amity with Prince Hall affiliated. You would not believe the many times I've come across someone characterizing the reason for the non-acceptance of it as a racist move. Okay, when they don't, we didn't accept. We're the last ones in the union to start making steps. We've been working on this for many, many, many years, and you're
not the last.
We're among the last. No.
Well, I mean, there are egregious folks out there where they are not working toward this at all. So yeah. Florida is doing something.
Yeah, and understanding what has happened is important. So people, if something is proposed, so like we proposed that, and it doesn't go through because it needed to have 2/3 majority votes, or because it wasn't written in a way that we could vote for it now, or if we're waiting for something, the people that are not privy to this conversation, or they're not privy to all those details, they might automatically consider it, the craft just doesn't want to accept that. Not necessarily. There are perhaps steps that need to happen in order for it to run smoothly. And this year it happened with some less controversial topics, but because there were constitutional amendments, they have to sit another year. So even though something is accepted to go into vote, it's not automatic that it's going to be included in the Constitution. It'll go again on the next year to be voted in or not. But anyway, I don't want to tell many details about what happened exactly there, but it's a simplistic explanation to chuck it out to just racism or just ineptitude from the part of the leadership. It's nuanced, and unless you read the thing and you actually know the reasons, then you have very little not authority, but you have very little to stand on when it comes to criticizing it.
That was putting that really politely. So way to be a diplomat, Juan. Way to be a diplomat.
This guy's a gentleman.
Sometimes.
Only when it's being recorded for prosperity.
Damn right.
Jason, Hammy, anything else you guys want to add?
I'm just mystified that you combine the words prosperity and posterity.
What did I say? Anyway.
Posterity.
Posterity. I was like,
Yeah.
is this something
Like,
your
wait a
doctor
second.
does?
Yeah. I didn't say it. And if I say it, edit it and post.
I need to check your posterity.
Yes. John, it's time for your posterity exam.
Oh, I'm tired. On that note, Hammy, anything else you want to add?
The only thing I would add, and this would even have come up in the closing thoughts, but really that I think anybody who is not even in the officer's line yet should actually start attending Grand Lodge sessions before they are one of those principal three who are going to vote. Because I think you should, get down there, figure out what it's all about, so that when you're actually down there for the real thing, that you're ready and you know what you're going to be doing down there. That's just my advice on that, because I've already been to one. I've enjoyed it.
Good advice.
Of course, I had a good reason to be there. So that was when I got my Grandmaster's Education Award. So
very, very good award indeed. Okay, let's move on to Shameless Plug's final thoughts. Moving along, starting with Robert Johnson for his final thought.
My final thought is, again, you should always go to Grand Lodge sessions. We've made it a point to figure out how to bring every single new Master Mason to sessions his first year in. It's highly recommended. Even if if a room gets paid for, or you go in with another brother and you guys split a room, like I've been to sessions where it was 5 of us in a single occupant room where we're just sleeping in sleeping bags. Like, we don't care. We bring the old school 1970s briefcase bar, and we just have a great time at sessions, both talking about the legislation that happens, getting closer as brothers, and just kind of fellowshipping. It's a really good time for that too. But also, a lot of times I think sessions is underused in terms of somewhat a historical thing you can leverage, right? So I've been trying to get my family to come with, because it's in Springfield, Illinois, like Lincoln Memorial and all of these things. I'm sorry, Lincoln's grave and tomb is down there, and it's the capital of Illinois, and there's the town where Lincoln is, and there's all these great things to do for families. And so if you could swing it, you're in sessions all day, and maybe your wife and the kids, or your wife and a friend or something, maybe they can go out on the town and check it out. Because it can be a family thing, because there's usually dinners and stuff that are a lot more fun when spouses can get involved and go. If they're into that, I understand there's a lot of spouses out there that don't want anything to do with it. They feel like, it's an old guys club or whatever. Or whatever the case is, right? It's young at heart, and I think everybody really tends to get along. I think most of the wives of the members that I know really get along pretty well. Even if they don't go to Masonic functions, they all have a really good time talking, and I don't know, like making fun of us or whatever. Nick Johnson's wife used to call it the theater club, right? So it's pretty funny. But go to Grand Lodge sessions. It's a lot of fun. Highly recommend it. October, first weekend in October. I think it's actually the way the code is written. Grand Lodge sessions for Illinois is the first Friday after the first Tuesday in October. However that works, but it's this first weekend in October. I'll be there as always, and it'll be a lot of fun. So if I see you down there, great. And that's it. I'll see more people at Esotericon next week. It's going to be fantastic. Really looking forward to that. I'm coming with my wife. Corey and I are both going down. So you guys will, if you follow me on Facebook or whatever, and you know my wife, and she'll yell at me and make fun of me on Facebook, and you guys all get a laugh, she'll be there so you can high five her. That's it. So Masonic podcast, when's KMU, 9:30 Sunday nights, and that's all. Thanks.
Okay, good. Hammy, Mike the intern. You've got a busy next 2 days coming up.
Yes. Well, tomorrow's my birthday, of course, and then
Hey,
thank you. And then Saturday, yes, I'm going to be getting my what do they call it? The ceremonial for the shrine. So I'll be getting my fez. So yeah. Looking
Somebody
forward to
hear
it.
that?
I think what is that? I don't know. I heard they put oatmeal in your underwear.
And then give you a wedgie with it.
Yeah,
That could be.
hours to wash that out.
Yeah. I'm just looking forward to it. I think it's going to be fun. I think, I'm a little nervous about what they do, but because I do know it's all about jocularity, but so yes. Yeah. But I'll be getting my fez, so I'm actually kind of excited for that too. So
I'm sure pictures will be abound.
oh yeah.
I'm also gonna just mandate this. I would never ever impose some executive authority, but
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna execute executive authority, and I'm gonna say if you have your fez, it is mandatory that you wear it on the next episode.
Okay.
Yes.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
The usual sign. Good stuff. All right. Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Let's see. Juan. Final thoughts.
And there we go. And my mind's busy right now. It's just very busy. It has been an enlightening situation for me to actually get to sit in the Grand Lodge sessions. I'm glad that I did it. I wish I had more flexibility to be there multiple days and stay a little bit later. But the amount of the event that I was able to participate in was a great experience. So I do recommend to brothers that have never done it, if it's near enough to where you live that you can travel with a few brothers, I think it's worth doing. Again, I don't want to end it in a sad note, but the biggest lesson was the situation with the past Grandmaster, and it really gave us a lot to think about. So if we haven't said it enough, be mindful and be appreciative of the fact that you are here. For all those brothers out there, take care of your temple. Listen, it's no joke. Really, take care of your temple. And tomorrow you could do something better to improve your health. And don't do it just because we're asking you. Just do it because there's people that want to hang on to you for a little longer at the end. So, I may this brother rest in peace, and may his memory and his legacy live forever. Anyway, on a lighter note, I got some cool stuff happening in the Winding Stairs, brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Go to thewindingstairs.com, sign up for the email so you can be the first ones to find out what's cooking. And till next week, brothers, thank you for listening to the Masonic Roundtable. Invite 2 brothers tomorrow so that they can enjoy it. Good evening, brothers.
There you go. Jason.
So my body is clearly a temple, ancient, crumbling, probably haunted.
I get it. You're a dad now. It's a dad joke.
Anyway, Grand Lodge sessions. Interesting occurrence. I treat Grand Lodge sessions kind of like I treat Masonic Week. I'm there for the interaction with the folks, not necessarily some of the pomp and circumstance or some of the drier meetings that go on. So really enjoy the times that I've gone down to Richmond for our Grand Lodge sessions. Usually get to hang out with Edgar Gonzalez from Masonic Revival when we're down there, so we always have a good time, and sometimes we have a good time with Joe Martinez too. Not often, but sometimes. Occasionally. So that's all I've got. Appreciate everyone sticking with us. Looking forward to seeing a bunch of the Knights and Squires at Esotericon coming up in just over a week. So it's going to be great to see you all there. It's going to be an awesome event, and looking forward to sharing some goodies with those of you who are there.
Well, there you go. Very cool. That, man, it's hard to believe it's right around the corner. Very cool. Yeah. So back to me. Juan did a great job really covering the whole aspects of the Grand Lodge experience, as it were. Because we could go down lots of different rabbit holes, but I think he did a very good job summarizing the highlights of things that you should be looking out for, and all good advice from the rest of the hosts on being active and trying something new, right? If you haven't, even if you've been before, if nothing else, shake the hand of a brother you haven't met yet, because that's the best place to get everyone in your state and your jurisdiction, and many from out of your jurisdiction, to share in this great fraternity that we have, and have just good fraternal communication. So that's really what the externalities, as we like to talk about, the extra benefits of this fraternity are. You have the written ones about some of the benefits that we get, but then there are all the extra benefits that we sometimes tend to overlook. So with that, it's been a great episode. Thanks very much for watching. Want to thank all of the super chats. We've had quite a few. Joe Martinez finally got his payment from his wife, so he was able to get back to popping in the super chat and supporting us on YouTube. Lucas Hess, John Lawrence, and even sneaking in his brother David Lawrence, also sneaking in. So thank you guys very much for giving us a little bit of extra love outside of the Patreon, right here live on YouTube. So again, we appreciate you for supporting the show and being part of the conversation, because just like there's the fifth Beatle, where all of you are the extra host of this round table. There's no one at the head. All of you are part of this round table. With that, I want to thank you very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.